Nice Radio's Kalalu presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio, first aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts at 9 p.m. on Sundays. Recently, we have moved on to Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 28th day of December 2024. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. Dear friends, we've come to the end of yet another year, 2024. And as we reflect on the state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we acknowledge that the country is perhaps at one of its lowest ebbs. Of course, there are those who have been living off the fat of the hog and who would tell you that all of the problems that have been identified during the year 2024 were really creations of the imaginations of those who do not like the ruling administration. But that is precisely the same comment that they have been making since 2002, the end of their first year in office. So the truth of the matter is that when you examine St. Vincent and the Grenadines in retrospect during 2024, the headline feature of the year would have been murders. The rate at which murders have been committed during 2024 speaks of a country that has lost control of itself. The Prime Minister of this country, several years ago, took on the responsibility for Minister of National Security. And it is understood, even under his tenure as Prime Minister, that when individuals are not performing as well as they should, or they're expected to be, they are replaced. They change around. But the portfolio of national security has not been turned around since the death of Vincent Beach and the assumption of that position, of that portfolio, by the Prime Minister himself. And that is several years now. So one therefore has to take into consideration the performance of the minister in his portfolio. That one should understand is the norm. So in the case of education, we've had Mike Brown, we've had Gerlin Miguel, we have had Clayton Bergen from time to time during their respective tenures. The longest serving Minister of Education would have been Gerlin Miguel. But others have moved around. We've seen that more recently. Some positions have changed. Remember, we had Seth Mackey in one portfolio in tourism and sport, he was in health, all sorts of things. But the general belief and usual policy is that cabinet reshuffles are often the result of the performance or lack thereof of the respective ministers vis-a-vis the portfolios to which they were originally assigned. But here it is that for a considerable period of time, for several years, the Minister of National Security has shown himself to be relatively incompetent insofar as redressing the rate of murders in this country is concerned. And if there was any doubt as to whether or not that portfolio should have been given up by the current holder, then the change in the number of murders committed between 2022 and 23 alone should have sufficed. If you move from 42 to 50 odd, a 30% increase in the number of murders committed in a single year, then one has to understand that it is completely out of control. And for that number to continue into 2024 must be seen as a clear indication of sheer incompetence. And one wonders whether there is any sort of cabinet discussion as to the allocation of this portfolio, or an explanation as to why this portfolio should not be handed over to somebody considered far more capable, far more knowledgeable, far more proficient in respect of combating crime. Several years ago, you may recall that this program, Just Another Look, chided the current administration for its inability to adequately address the crime situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And what we have seen over the years is a readiness on the part of the current administration to offer us palliative explanations. So we've had all sorts of different excuses offered as to why we have a climbing murder rate in this country. In fact, the murder rate has become so much a central feature of Vincentian reality that people hardly talk of other crimes. And there are other heinous crimes that have been committed in this country. One has only to sit in on a session at the family court to have an understanding of what is happening, particularly with women and children in Vincentian society. People, the farmers, have stopped complaining about predial larceny because they recognize that nothing has been done really in order to facilitate a reduction in predial larceny. Farmers are leaving that profession, that career option, as a result of the inability of the administration to facilitate the safety of their crops and their animals. That has been a major problem. But our attention is often diverted away from crime. And Vincentians are fed up of being given the impression that we are making progress when the evidence is simply not there. What has been happening over 2024 in particular, as you have recognized, is that the Vincentian public has been treated to a number of projects that yield big buildings so that people can see them. And the real substantive issues are not being adequately addressed. We also recognize that there's nothing wrong with a prime minister wanting to be popular and wanting to believe that his popularity at home has led to an international image. There was a time perhaps that the prime minister of this country may have wanted to see himself become the most popular prime minister in the history of the Caribbean. That has not happened. It has not happened. When he went to his first CARICOM meeting, you may recall that he was talking about this organization must move beyond being a talk shop. It must be an aggressive act representative body in terms of providing leadership for this region. That has not happened. CARICOM remains today a stoic institution in many respects. A tremendous amount of research has been done. One paper after another has been produced. But at the end of the day, CARICOM as an institution has not impressed the peoples of the Caribbean. It is interesting that towards the end of 2024, CARICOM leaders appear to be singing from the same song sheet in terms of the need for regional unity. And why is that? It has to do with the state of the international economy. And the fact that the changes that are taking place in the global economy do not bode well for the future of small island states and their capacity not just to survive but to thrive in the international environment. So looking down the road, they're realizing that institutional frameworks are being established in different parts of the world that are going to make funding, development funding, assistance for projects, more and more of a challenge for small island developing states. And you recognize that from the meeting of the small island development states since in Antigua and Barbuda during the course of the year. See, there's a tendency now to run to establish closer relations with Africa only after the fact. We're an adhocratic region. We do things after the fact. We respond to crises rather than look ahead of them. So suddenly, in 2004, towards the end of 2004, Mayor Mottley, perhaps considered by many as the most popular prime minister in the region, at least at present, and being invited all over the world to speak on issues that in places that perhaps the prime minister of this country may have wanted to be able to do over time. He has started to talk about regional unity. And herself, and now this prime minister or prime minister, talks about writing the United Nations and asking for, pleading for global peace. Global peace. Coming from a country that has just catapulted up the ladder in terms of the number of murders committed at home in a single year. It's kind of, challenging to reconcile the two. That here at home, you as the Minister of National Security have proven yourself virtually incapable of adequately addressing the murder rate within your borders. Rewriting the United Nations, suggesting that the global environment must do much more to facilitate the development of a peaceful world. Bit of a anomaly there, but of course he's an intellectual, so perhaps he has some sort of academic rationale for that line of thinking. But suddenly we are back in the 1950s. Without recognizing it, many of our Caribbean leaders are now having the same discussions that leaders had in the 1950s that ultimately led to the formation of the West Indian Federation. A rather interesting period in our history. They who were so anxious to show that they were new kids on the block and that they were going to make meaningful changes to the region are now recognizing that there is safety in numbers. They are now recognizing that this region of ours is in need of greater attention to its own people and and bringing us closer together. They're also recognizing that the international community has created so many economic and political blocks that you have to see the region as a major block that can then, as a block, form global alliances. What was different from what P.A. Marisho and others were saying at the time? But what prevented us from being a unified block back then is still the critical factor that is impinging on the creation of that reality now and in the future. Selfishness, insularity. That is our problem. We are at a stage where we recognize that the international community is prepared to treat us as a region. If we didn't see ourselves as one region, working together in our collective best interest rather than individual insular entities, crabs in a barrel, the international community is saying, put your act together, get your act together. And all that is happening is Mia Mottley is leading the charge, saying the same things that were being said in the 1950s about the need for a grouping of small island nations to get their act together and to recognize how much they need each other in order for the region to survive. We're very good at talking. We are very poor at acting. We make reference to the success story of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the Eastern Caribbean Monetary Union, the Eastern Caribbean system of managing its finances and ensuring that we have a stable Eastern Caribbean dollar, perhaps the strongest and most stable within the entire Caribbean. But again, the rest of the region still has within its mind the Greater and the Lesser Antilles. Still has in mind that the larger countries, the Jamaica, the Barbados, the Trinidad and Tobago, and now increasingly Guyana, that those are the ones naturally to lead us. And at the same time, leaders in the smaller countries are saying, hey, look at us. We are intellectuals too, and we can make contributions to the development of our region. We've seen that in 2024. The crisis is coming home, or has come home. And so, in their usual ad hoc manner, the leaders of CARICOM, our political leaders, are at their wits' end trying to find solutions to the problems that ail us. And one of the ones that has come to the top of the list is crime. But we knew all along that crime had gone out of control in Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. We knew that for many years. But as a region, we watched it and says, oh, it will happen in those countries. We thought that Barbados was under control for so many years. Now Barbados has to confront the reality of a rising crime rate. It was only a matter of time. And so you have prime ministers without the appropriate information, without the appropriate foundation and research, making statements about crime because they are leaders of their respective countries, offering nonsensical explanations. But they need to say something because their respective populations are crying out for the absence of control at a governmental level of the crime rates in these countries that constitute the Caribbean. It is now that they were talking about drugs coming from Latin America. That has been so for many decades. And only now we seem to think that it is important to forge an alliance with governments and their security agencies in Latin America. We get all sorts of mumble jumble explanation. A plane comes in, takes off, takes fuel, carry people off, and then we are told, oh, they turned off the transponder. We don't know that they did that. But we have a Minister of National Security who thought it appropriate to say to the nation, somebody who's supposed to know, or some people who's supposed to know from different countries, tell him sometimes they do that. Well, sometimes they do. But was this such an instance? We don't know. We don't know. And we are expected to accept that as an explanation. The same way that we are expected to accept what was said at a major regional forum. There's high-valued women that are pushing their men into crime in order to keep up their high-valued lifestyles. What a thing for intelligent people to sit down around a table in a conference on crime, and everybody sits quietly. And the speaker says, and what I'm saying, everyone of you inside of here know what I'm saying is the absolute truth, and not a man or woman move. Not a man or woman refutes it. That's what we have become in this Caribbean. So it's not surprising that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, crime has gotten out of control. And each time we have a spike, the Minister of National Security offers an explanation. Don't worry, because I am speaking and we are planning, but we can't tell you what we're doing because, of course, it's security, right? So when the situation with the plane in Canwan came up, don't worry, we will find out. But what we're telling you is what somebody tell us could have happened. That's the way we've been operating. We've been told about crimes being committed against yachties for years. We still have not brought that under control. But we're promoting tourism. We are promoting tourism. We have a major concern about the future of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and its capacity to adequately address crime. That came out of this year, 2024. But here we are, that the three persons seemingly responsible for crime, the Minister of National Security, the Commissioner of Police, and the Assistant Commissioner of Police, don't seem to be seeing eye to eye in terms of whether or not this country has gangs. For the Assistant Commissioner of Police, Bailey says straight up, yes, there are gangs. He says, reputable agency has identified between 4 and 6 gangs operating in the country. Now, how is it that the Assistant Commissioner of Police can make that definitive statement, and he has stood by that statement? Stood by that statement. And you can't seem to get synergy or consistency between what he is saying definitively and what the Prime Minister and Minister of National Security is saying on the one hand and the Commissioner of Police on the other. If we can't have a sense of unity among those individuals, enough for us to feel comfortable that we have a handle on crime and the causes of crime, then we're not going to be able to adequately address crime in the country whatsoever. For all the talk of the education revolution, as we mentioned in the previous program, the incident a couple of weeks ago of the police stopping a vehicle with 4 young men and finding a weapon inside it, and then searching homes of the individuals and finding an AR-15, ages 19, 20, 20, 23. Every one of them born after 2001. And therefore, products of our education revolution. We can talk about those who pass exams. We said education was compulsory for everybody. Primary and secondary school. But then let us find an explanation as to how these young children, where did they slip through the cracks? To what extent have we been following a history of these and others like them who, quote unquote, have slipped through the cracks? During 2024, this is our new reality. Are they members of a gang? And how many more like them exist within the society who seem to find a life of crime or the acquisition of firearms for whatever purpose as an option for living in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in this day and age. But as we recognize, the Assistant Commissioner of Police, Bailey, has noted that this country does not have any gang laws. There's no anti-gang laws. And so the police are not sufficiently empowered to redress the issue of crime. But that is understandable. Because if the leadership of national security does not seem to think that we have gangs and have been arguing that we don't have gangs, then it is hardly likely that that individual will see the need for the establishment of anti-gang laws. Perhaps he's waiting till we have so many gangs running around St. Vincent and the Grenadines that we have no choice but to hastily, in another ad hoc manner, establish anti-gang legislation. We wait. We've been saying that for years. That we operate in a system, a political system, and a governance system that operates on ad hocracy after the fact. For how many years have we had the same Minister of National Security? And if we were to use the performance criteria, then he has failed in the leadership of this portfolio. So it's kind of difficult for you to be pointing fingers at other ministers as failing on their respective portfolios, while you have little evidence to show success in your own. We're getting all sorts of mumbo-jumbo reasons as to why we don't have a budget presentation ready in what should be or what has been perceived as the usual time. But the Prime Minister seems to have forgotten that he was the one who placed that expectation on the nation by boasting over the many years that he's been Prime Minister of the capacity of the country to be able to facilitate more meetings of Parliament. Oh, we need to do more of the people business and we need to take it more seriously, therefore Parliament will meet more often. Budget will be at such and such a time and blah. Now we're getting a mumbo-jumbo explanation as to why the budget is not going to be done in the usual time. But of course, There are those who may very well believe that if 2025 is going to be an election year, then maybe it is an election budget that is coming. One that may very well be appeasing to the ruling regime and a mechanism designed to facilitate continued support for the ruling regime. Maybe. That may be what is happening. But one will have to wait to see the contents of the budget, because one recognizes that the spate of roadworks that are taking place and in which constituencies they are taking place. People are not stupid. They are acknowledging what they see, and they see movements taking place with regard to facilitating a positioning of the ruling regime so that they can be returned to political office whenever the next election takes place. We're seeing the seeming haste to finish capital projects. So we're going to start work or to start work at least on several projects. So you can point to the start of the work on the new hospital, which you're passing up and down all the time, you will see. In town, you will get the port on one side, we're trying to finish that. And at the same time, we want to start work on the parliament, the new parliament. So we want to transform the society so that we can say, yes, we are doing well. Look how many more fanciful buildings we are putting in place. But as many people have found out, in many countries around the world, the poor that you have with you always are also voters. You can fool some of them some of the time. You may even be able to fool some of them all of the time. But you cannot fool all of the people all of the time. Over a period of time, individuals get a greater understanding of the dynamics of your brand of politics. And they see it repeated over time. They can recognize who has made gains, who have made gains under your leadership. What segment of the society? Who are the individuals? And so we can talk about Sandals bringing more people to the country. But it's like the international airport. We have more planes coming, thanks to Sandals. Sandals market, tapping those markets to determine whether or not we get more flights coming in our direction. That's what is happening. It's not the government initiative per se. It may well be Sandals. But how much are we benefiting from Sandals? How much are we finding ourselves, or have we entered into a relationship with a major international entity, albeit from the Caribbean, that has a significant set of concerns raised by governments in other parts of the region? How much merit does the Antigua government have in terms of the accusation they are leveling at Sandals? Have we covered the bases to avoid any such issues emerging in our relationship with Sandals? We are opening, handing over the Holiday Inn Express. It's our building. It's government funds. But at the same time, the government has been unable to prevent people from having their animals roam all over the place, including in the property. So we are creating and continuing the ad hoc approach to governance. But the problem for the country is that the protagonists for everything, the defender of everything, the explainer of everything is the same single individual. And in 2024, we recognize the same old system of governance. Since 2001, since the appointment of the first Deputy Prime Minister, we recognize that there has been a tendency not to ensure that any of our young parliamentarians get hold of that position. Why is that? Why is it that the longest serving deputy prime ministers in this country are persons who have not distinguished themselves in politics, who have not distinguished themselves in terms of leadership in the country? How is it? How is it we are boasting of providing opportunities for young people in leadership, and that is not made manifest in the governance of the country, in the ruling party? Where are all the young persons that they were boasting about? They've all gone different places. And those who have stayed in national politics have grown old in the job. They have grown old. What impact have we had on governance in this country and the development of the country from those quote-unquote young persons that were given a training brief, apparently, when they joined politics? So nobody seems to be able to impact the comrades' decision making. Then last, did you hear the comrades mention Saboto Caesar? There's a time when he was talking about Saboto and Camilo about potential leaders going forward. That conversation ceased after the convention where members of Saboto's constituency were chanting his name as the Prime Minister came into the convention hall. Understand that? Understand the political history and the political history of the leadership and governance style of the Prime Minister of this country, and we will understand why you're not hearing more about certain other individuals who were once touted as future leaders. So we come to the end of 2024 just as we came to the end of 2023. High murder rate, high crime rate, and a divided national security position on whether or not there are gangs operating in St. Vincent and Negril. Remember, Eyewitness News, dated the 23rd of December, quotes Assistant Commissioner of Police Trevor Bailey as saying, "I have seen and read the report that was generated from agencies outside of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who refer to as much as 4 to 6, talking about gangs. And the names that were mentioned in the report are names that are known to us as law enforcement." This is the Assistant Commissioner of Police. And he defined what he sees and knows in law to be a gang. So the idea is we are ending 2024 no different. In fact, let us rephrase that. Very different because it is 1 year later. In 2022, 42 murders. In 2023, we hit the 50 mark. We went above it. We are there again in 2024. So how dare anyone, let alone the Minister of National Security, suggest to us that we have improved our performance in terms of restricting crime and serious crime, and more particularly murders in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. At the end of 2024, dear friends, we have no better explanation for the existing crime rate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that we have ever had in the past. So now, the rise in crime is a factor worthy of consideration for regional unity. It is far more important to address the crime rate as a region because the evidence is there as to the impact of crime on productivity, on economic growth. People are being killed. Those are valuable members of society who could otherwise and should otherwise have been promoted into productive citizens if our education revolution was working. We only know to talk about the education revolution as working when we're ready to boast about the number of people who pass exams and their grades, and we ignore at our peril all those who have failed in the education system. We have no real explanation for their failures. All that happened is we have guaranteed them that we will push you through the system. We're not holding back anybody, push them through the system. So everybody can say they went to school. But what are they qualified to do if you have failed? The psychological impact of failure in the education system in these Caribbean countries, the psychological impact is overwhelming. Because in contrast, those who have succeeded recognize that they have an acceptable social status that comes with having been successful. And in many respects, the system of social stratification that exists in our society allow those who have achieved academically to see themselves as more highly favored in the society. Several years ago, Carl Theodore, economist at the University of the West Indies, Trinidad and Tobago, who worked for a long time with trade unions, advising, analyzing, etc., commented that if there is not an appropriate safety net, there will come a time when those who are at the upper social strata in our respective societies will become the targets of the criminal elements in the society. The higher your level of poverty, the greater the likelihood that at some point the society will find itself in trouble. Because back then he was asking the question, what do you expect of them who are considered failures in the society by having fallen through the cracks in the education system, who have not received your attention, and who are not in any way enamored by your offer of palliatives such as the YES program, etc., at the end of which people have difficulty addressing a life, a meaningful life, in a situation where your take-home pay cannot take you home. What do you expect of Vincentian public servants who are listening to neighboring St. Lucia and realize that the government has found a mechanism to afford them a 13% increase in salary for 2025 and a $500 bonus at the end of 2024? Well, you remember there was a time when public servants were given bonus. And we were told, yeah, it's not much, but it would allow you to at least buy a pair of shoes or something for the Christmas. Those days are long gone. In a similar vein, we were accustomed to hearing about the contract with civil society all through the passage towards the elections of 2001. You don't hear much about that since. All the talk about being on the cusp of economic takeoff and all the institutions that we were supposed to be putting in place to facilitate moving beyond that point, all of them have fallen apart. We have not moved beyond the cusp. In fact, let's rephrase that. We may have slipped back down. Rather than climbing over the cusp, we have slipped. Where are we in comparison to our neighbors? What it is our neighbors in the OECS are doing that allow them to be able to stand tall and suggest that they are better off than us economically? What is it? We do not define progress purely by the construction of new edifices. We've seen that. We've built new police stations all over the place because we thought that that was a big thing. It was really a way of ensuring that police officers were supportive of the ruling regime. Because as Jomo highlighted a few weeks ago, many of the fanciful buildings that were constructed are not properly functional to this day. Government has been delightfully good at building buildings and facilities and hopeless at the level of maintenance. One example, look at the amount of money spent. The Annas Bale Sporting Complex between 2007 Cricket World Cup. The lack of maintenance through to 2023, when we spent a lot of money again to refurbish the same facility. Lack of maintenance. How many other institutions we are creating that will experience the same? What it is we are not learning? What is it we are not learning? So, the problem, number one problem in the country for 2024 has been crime, and that is carrying over into 2025 with no end in sight. With no end in sight. Okay? So, what else we've had in 2024? Well, it tail of woe, the health sector, the healthcare delivery system. That has not changed. Sadly, we have the example of the lady who came from England and who found it necessary to say to the media that she was one who defended the health system in St. Vincent and the Grenadines while residing in England. But she came home because her sister was ill. And the experience she had in trying to get her sister appropriate and timely health care in St. Vincent and the Grenadines while she was here left her finding it absolutely necessary to go to the media and explain her abject disappointment with what she experienced. It is only when cases like that appear in the media that people in this country believe what others have been saying for some time. It's when it falls in your kitchen or in your garden, as the old people say, that you take notice because it hurts you. So you defend without knowing the facts. But you must know something is wrong if years ago we got a highly sensitive machine and left it in a container, a hot container, on the Victoria Park for months. Because we got the machine and made no arrangements for where it was going to be located. And in the end, we decided to put it in a private place, while we then begin the process of making space for it in the main hospital. That is an example of how we plan. Remember, man say, I the one with the plan. And universities, which have not been named, are studying that plan. Well, from the looks of it, it can't be that they're studying it because of its validity. It can't be for that, if that is the way we plan. If so many people in the country continue to complain about going for medical treatment and then having to be told, go find your medication because we don't have it in stock, what does that tell us? Remember years ago, Minister of Education, Douglas Slater, had to apologize to opposition member Daniel Cummins in Parliament when Daniel Cummins announced that we were unable to access medication through the OECS facility because we hadn't paid up. And the minister vehemently denied that any such thing took place. During the lunch break, he went and found out the truth in his own ministry and came back and apologized to Daniel Cummins and then offered an explanation. So if the minister was not aware that we were off the list because we didn't pay up, then what do you think is happening in other sectors in our society? Who was supposed to address that? Is the reason why we continue throughout 2024 to comment on the absence of making, or the failure on the part of the government of making public the Poverty Assessment Report of 2018. Whatever you may think about how the report was done, the report was completed and ought to have been made available to the public. But by not having it made available, and instead rising to the defense of why you have not made it public, leaves people bothered. Is it because it showed something contrary to what you were telling the nation in respect of how you were treating poverty? The public is yet to know whether or not that report indicated an increase in poverty levels in certain parts of the country, an increase in indigence in certain parts of the country. But instead of making the report available, you found it more convenient, and still do, to say we didn't like the way the survey was done. And consequently, we don't like the outcome because they can't be valid if the process was not right. So since when the government sits down and determines that it will determine the correctness and appropriateness of the poverty assessment survey? We weren't asking for that when you were in opposition. You didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with the process of determining the levels of poverty and indigence in the country when you were in opposition. But lo and behold, you're in government. And if a report comes out that shows that there are increases while you are telling the nation that we are doing well economically, socially, otherwise, then you must have a problem. And so in 2024, we are not sure what has happened to our assessment of poverty in this country. People can tell that they're seeing more people on the streets. They're seeing more people sleeping on the streets. They're seeing more people sleeping in bus stops, in bus sheds, by the bus stop. They're seeing that. They're recognizing the signs of indigence in this country. But at festival times, the comment is, you see how many people in Kingstown? And how Vincentians say they ain't have no money. What happens at festival times? Even the poorest members of the society believe they have a right to some sense of enjoyment, to be the beneficiary of some sort of easing of the tension. And yes, they spend what little they have. Who make up the bulk of political parties? Poor people. People who are hand-to-mouth. At one level, you have the funders of the party. They fund the party because they know what they want and they know what they will get if the party wins. But at the lower level, the people who rush to public meetings, to rallies, by and large, the majority are poor people. And they go there in the hope that they will hear good news about a brighter day coming for them. And it's the reason why if you put a $5 on the old age pension, you can get up and thump your chest on a political platform because you know what that $5 extra means to the individual. That's why you could do it. You could play politics with it because you understand what poverty means for those people. And so yes, they have an understanding that they too should find an opportunity to enjoy themselves. They too should be able to buy a new shoe, yes. And so you see them spend sometimes what they even don't have at Christmas and at Carnival. Opportunities for a little bit of self-enjoyment. Lablash. But ask the businesses, how many people come to purchase things at Christmas time, knowing that they have no down payment and the first payment is in January, at which time many of the appliances that they have purchased will be taken back because they can't pay. That's a more critical criterion. Follow that channel. You want to do surveys? Do that kind of survey. And let us see what the result is. So, the fact of the matter is that we recognize the challenges of 2024 and they are going over into 2025. We made mention earlier about the announcements in neighboring St. Lucia of the 13% increase to public servants. But look at the situation here. You know that some years ago 5 public servants represented by the Public Service Union ended up in court, the Public Service Union making a case that these people were overlooked by the Public Service Commission. That their length of service, the absence of any promotional exam, etc., disenfranchised them with regard to upward mobility in their respective jobs in the public service. They won the case. They won the case. It was an embarrassment for the government and anybody associated with the public service leadership at that time. Public Service Commission looked rather silly in the case. But the government immediately appealed. That is several years now. Note the history of the way our government operates. Then there's the issue of the public servants who went to court again represented by their union because they were concerned that they were denied entry to their workplaces because they were told they needed to have the vaccine in order to go to work. They won that case. And immediately, the government appealed. We hear the appeal. Lawyers are asking, why is it taking too long? Because there's something called social justice, you know. There's something called natural justice. But as those individuals await the appeal, they must bring to mind how long it took for the public servants who, acting on what was supposed to be in an agreement between the public service, teaching service and the government, that they could have entered politics. Look how long that case has taken. So the government can clearly intervene in the process in a manner that while they say we're waiting on the courts, the individuals concerned may very well find that the wheels of justice turn particularly slowly where government is concerned. You want to know how slow they turn? Ask Marcus de Freitas. The whole of the new parliament will probably be finished on Marcus's former property before he gets all of his payment for the property. That is the system that we are living in. So when the government, when Gonzales and they were in opposition, and they were anxious to tell you about the behavior of the ruling regime at the time, the New Democratic Party government, and about the levels of unemployment, levels of underemployment, the level of corruption, the level of greed and graft and what have you. Imagine the auditor, the audit department have consistently complained about the poor quality equipment they are made to work with. We have our government and digital transformation, but that ain't reached the audit department yet. The audit department is never up to date, and there is an expectation that the culture of the audit department is that it must be several years behind. You can't do that in your business, but the government can, and apparently the government does. So the audit report, the latest one, the most recent one, is late. Understand that? They complain about shortage of staff. The audit department. So while we mentioned the 5 public servants that they were talking about promotions, Eyewitness News of 27 December, the Director of Public Prosecutions calls for promotion of police officers. Imagine that. The Director of Public Prosecutions has supported the cause of the police officers attached to the witness care unit based at her office. She is seeing it, seeing the work they do. Right? And she knows that they have not had regular promotions in the police service for almost 2 years. There are some people in the police service who no longer bothered about stripes, you know. Because in many instances, they seem immune to the fact that they're being bypassed consistently. So here is the Director of Public Prosecutions, Shejila McDowell, calling for the promotion of Police Constables 212 Descent and 821 Telesford, who have 18 and 16 years of service respectively. Eyewitness News quote her. The witness care officers are not civil servants. They are police officers who are of a different pedigree in terms of persons to serve the public. That's what she said at a special sitting of the High Court. They have been an attachment, she says. Some of them have come over from that very 2024. But they have been always working along with us. And for those who are serving in the High Court, Constables Descent and Telesford, they have been serving quite well and engaging on a level that is highly professional with witnesses, defendants, court staff, and the like. But they are still police constables, she says. And that is the challenge I am having with police officers on attachment at the office of the DPP. They are working exemplary, and so they have outgrown their ranks. And I am hoping that as we step into 2025, there can be some suitable gifts. So I am waiting on that. Suitable gifts, not acting appointments. End of quote. We tell you. Yep. Look where we reach. So it's not only Poya and others who took the bull by the horns and on whose behalf the Public Service Union went to the courts to challenge Public Service Commission behavior. Here is the Director of Public Prosecution publicly acknowledging how these people are still constables after 18 and 16 years of service respectively. But they're more like them in the service. There's some people who give up on promotion. They go serve all the time, go home and take the pension. Because they don't have anyone to talk out for them. Who knows what will be the reaction to the Director of Public Prosecution now that she has come out public in respect of two officers in particular. And it's interesting, she says, so I am waiting on that. Suitable gifts, not acting appointments. Yeah? Imagine that. So when you hear people talking on the streets about the challenges of getting promotion in the public service, what is the response? Yeah? The lawyer, the defense counsel, Grant Connell, says he's been raising that concern for some time. But it is interesting that the DPP makes the claim and then we get a response from the Commissioner of Police. Eyewitness News says up to 100 police officers left the force as of April 2024, either through retirement or resignation, with some being fed up with stagnation in the ranks. But the acting commissioner of police says in response, we are waiting. We are waiting. And I believe before the year is finished, that we'll have some answers for a number of persons who, because vacancies have to be released, you can't just promote people into a non-existent vacancy. Yeah? But I have given the police officers a few weeks ago the assurance that something will happen before the end of 2024. And so I am giving assurance to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This comes after the DPP. After the DPP is coming. So when you hear the Public Service Commission and you hear the Police Welfare Association and you hear the Teachers Union, because these are the institutions that are raising concerns in the public. The other unions, National Workers Movement and the CTAW, they seem to be partial to the government, or the government seems partial to them. Because the people who seem to be advocating for their employees are the Public Service Union, the Teachers Union, and the Police Welfare Association. So here we have a situation where the Director of Public Prosecution, this is a unique situation, that is not normal. But she takes up the cause because she believes it is just. She explains their level of performance is highly professional. She's trying to figure out how after 18 and 16 years respectively, these officers, Decent and Telesford, how come they can't get promoted? Are there many more like that within the service? What must be the level of frustration of these individuals? It's kind of difficult for you to be diligent at your job, to be professional, and to watch people who you recognize have less tenure, less service, and who fly past you. What did his Grand Colonel say? Madame DPP talked about gifts. I am telling you, they need to be recognized for their work. And he did say, I don't understand how this police force works sometimes. I made the analogy last time with birds. Some of them do nothing and just soar like them birds. No wind and they're going up. Yeah? So here we are. That we're doing wonderfully well. This is the same police service that we have to function in our national security. Do we have a national security system that is politically partisan? Do we have that? Do police officers have to declare their political affiliation? Or is their political affiliation assumed and on the basis of which they are treated within the service? At the end of 2024, this is where we are. We were talking about crime earlier in the program. This is where we are. So it's not surprising that a number of police officers are leaving and going into the British military, going into the British Navy. Our officers leaving St. Vincent and the Grenadines because they recognize that the grass is greener in the United Kingdom. But they're leaving here where there's a remarkably high murder rate, where we are recognizing that the system may not appear to be as fair as they once thought it was. That is our reality. One of the biggest stories coming towards the end of 2024, of course, is the story of the birth certificates that we saw drifting down the river, South River Road. And happily, Eyewitness News was able to pull a picture together of a bundle of completed birth certificates floating down the river and out to sea. Okay? So these were real birth certificates. Vincentian birth certificates. But Eyewitness News was on the ball and discovered that the registry, which is responsible for the production of these birth certificates and the retention of these birth certificates, has told police that there was no burglary at his offices, nor did they dispose of any birth certificates. So we have a mystery. Just like the plane that disappeared after takeoff from Canwan, here's another mystery. No break-in at the registry. No burglary. The registry says it didn't dispose of any birth certificate. But a whole heaping set of birth certificates in a folder floating down a river in Kingstown. You know that river, right? Past behind prep school and Richmond Hill School and the National Commercial Bank, and then it go below Halifax Street, behind Ritchie and South River Road, and so it floated. Right. The police says they were also informed. They got a report, but they were only able to retrieve some of the documents. So they have evidence that these were real certificates. So far, we have no comment. Now you know the value of birth certificates. So they could be used for passports. They could be used for voter registration cards. So is this an isolated incident? And who was responsible for so many birth certificates being cast into the river? We again dealing with matters of national security. Matters of national security. Sensitive matters. So we have a crisis in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The opposition New Democratic Party is at this point making the same accusations of the ruling ULP that the ULP made of the NDP in government in 2000. Accusations of corruption, accusation of greed, accusation of graft, accusation of poor roads, high cost of living, etc., etc. Same claims. The shoe is now on the other foot. It's now on the other foot. So at the end of 2024, we have more police stations, well constructed, but as Jomo said, some of them are not really hospitable. Some of them are not really well endowed. Some of them have no vehicles. Some of them phones are working. At the end of 2020. During 2024, we heard nothing about the cross-country road, so that looks like a dead duck. During 2024, we had no talk of integrity legislation. During 2024, we had no talk about the ecotourism hotel that was supposed to be constructed across the dry river. During 2024, we saw road construction taking place in different parts of the country while other parts are left like they were. In 2024, we haven't heard anything more about geothermal energy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Since we took up the side of Soufrière and got nothing out of it, that seemed to have gone AWOL. We used to hear talk about a possible wind project or wave project. We haven't heard anything about those alternative forms of energy. During 2024, the government has avoided discussing the poverty assessment report of 2018, and they haven't told us exactly what has been happening with poverty assessment report review that they were supposed to do in order to facilitate it. We've not come anywhere closer to building regional unity than we were back in the 1950s. And perhaps there's something there where people are now saying, well, maybe we are back in the 1950s and we need to be talking about unity because the region now more than ever needs unity, as though we didn't need it in 1950s. The same issues are there. The insularity of our political leaders. It's good for them to talk, but when to sit down and say, let us do this, they cannot put in CARICOM the requisite legislation to facilitate the imposition of sanctions on countries that default on decision making. So CARICOM becomes a toothless tiger. And it is the same since its formation. So it's pathetic to review the performances of all these outstanding personalities who have passed through the institution as CARICOM Secretaries General and to look at what have been their achievements. What have been their achievements really? From CARIFTA to CARICOM, what have they achieved? We cannot even agree even now on a Caribbean Court of Justice. So we want to talking about and Ralph and others talking about a unified position in the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We establish a CARICOM subcommittee on cricket, as though we forget that sport is much broader than cricket. There must be some nostalgia with them and this cricket business. They've sat down and talked about crime, talk about crime, but have done nothing really. Talk about alliances and forming this and forming that. But that's it. So if you cannot bring yourself to create and enact legislation that facilitates CARICOM as an entity that protects this region and allows for the region to move in unison, if we can't rise above that insularity, we're spitting in the wind. We are spitting in the wind. We are making a mockery of all that we have said that we have achieved over the years in terms of production of academics, scientists, some of the best persons in the world. We have provided civil service for much of the international community. We can identify Caribbean people in institutions all over the world. But we are not, as a region, necessarily the beneficiary of them. So at the end of the day, Derek Walters had to leave the region. Edward Kamau Brafitt had to leave the region. Why? Why? How many of our Nobel laureates felt comfortable living in this region? We hold them aloft as exemplary because they have won the Nobel Peace Prize. How have we facilitated their inputs in the determination of what we have become as a region? When A.N.R. Robinson, as Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister several years ago, commissioned the Time for Action, and Willie DeMass and Sridhar Ramphal and Roderick Rainford and others went all across the region, talking to people across the region and producing this massive institution book, A Time for Action. And it's all over the place now gathering dust. Because the young Turks that came afterwards didn't think there was anything to learn from that. Nobody makes reference to that because that time passed. Them old fellas, them old bogies and them. But yet when Sridhar Ramphal died, we were singing accolades, singing his praises. But one of his timeless contributions was the leadership of that grouping that responded to the call for action. A.N.R. Robinson says, let all ideas contend. The book is still there, gathering dust. Whole set of ideas emanating from the peoples of the region. And after that, we couldn't facilitate a stronger Caribbean Union. We are ending 2024 in much the same way that we would have ended 1962, when we tore West Indian Federation apart, when our leaders ignored the fact that as leaders they could not carry peoples into an arrangement without the engagement of the peoples. And we will never forget in Caribbean history the Alexander Bustamante mantra, that them little islands that dot in this Caribbean, they may have anything really, you know. Essentially that's what he was saying. They may have anything. All of them go rush and come to Jamaica. You can't afford that, because they could take everything we have. Today, Jamaica's dollar cannot stand close to the Eastern Caribbean dollar. Them little islands have been able to survive. But guess what? Those little islands could have been much farther ahead. We formed OECS, but can't seem to find the right mechanism. The same issues that plague CARICOM plague the OECS. And one would have imagined that since the OECS was formed after CARICOM, that it would have learned from the misgivings of CARICOM. That has not been the case. So we have two sub-institutions, neither of which had teeth. Neither of which had proven itself capable of facilitating genuine unity among our peoples. We end 2024 in a very, very sad state. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are gearing for an elections budget. They may package it all sorts of ways, but it is an election budget. There is no way that the current ULP administration is going to ignore the fact that it wants to retain governance in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Therefore, look at that budget and look at ways in which the government is going to seek to impress, as it normally does, largely through distractive politics, so that people are being urged, give us 4 or 5 more years. Give us 5 more. Because we're doing well. You don't see? So many of us wear red. We're doing very, very well. Leave us, let us continue to run the country. Never forget, but that leading member of the party said at a convention several years ago, we must not just own the campaign. We must not just own the things that we as a party want. We must own the jobs too. That reality may well have been fulfilled in more ways than one. We must own the jobs too. Ownership facilitates control. Enough said. We know as you prepare for 2025, everybody likes to make resolutions. It really doesn't matter whether or not you make a resolution. What is important is that each Vincentian takes the opportunity to determine what am I doing to make St. Vincent and the Grenadines a better place. That may mean many things to different people. But at the end of the day, what you want? You want a better nation where people see themselves essentially as having aspirations that are supported by the system of governance, social order. And we all recognize that this is home, and it is what we make it, or what we allow it to be. It is better to be part of the process rather than to be a victim of the process. Speak up. Let your voice be heard. But engage in proper analysis. Engage your critical thinking skills as you march forward with pride as Vincentians in 2025. There's nothing that prevents any Vincentian, nothing, from thinking productively and from seeking in every sphere of life that one is involved to make a meaningful contribution to the development of a society. Is there need for change? All of the time. What we are committed to is a better St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a more wholesome St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We've been told years ago that there was a commitment to producing a society that was together. But we've witnessed in 2024 a continuing descent into secularization. We have seen a disrespect for traditional values, including religion. We have seen a lack of respect for each other. We no longer consider individuals worthy of our respect. What has happened to our society? How did it come to be where it is? In large measure, the state of our politics has dictated the behavior of Vincentians. That is our reality. The time has come for us to come to terms with that reality. Can this society ever be unified again? That's extremely, extremely difficult. It's going to be much like the United States. For so many years of division, of pettiness, of political partisanship, of political patronage, it will take decades for us to reposition St. Vincent and the Grenadines into a place where people can feel comfortable, where every child can believe that I do in fact have an opportunity to become somebody and make a meaningful contribution to our society, not dependent on any politician, not dependent on any political party, but reliant on oneself and one's relationship with one's neighbor. Let us once more place a premium on who we are and who we wish to become, and work together to eradicate crime. We are begging all sorts. We're jumping from one thing to another. We have plan against crime that never worked. We have sport against crime that even got started. We're not sure. We've lost our way in terms of how we combat crime. And you see it, the confusion among the leadership of the national security forces. We have leadership in the country that does not appear to be listening, but more engaged in the promotion of the ego. That is a major problem. But that can be dealt with over time if we do our education right. There is no and has never been any education revolution in the post 2001 period. That has never happened. It's been a figment of the imagination of some people. The real evidence of change must begin with each individual reception. We cannot simply expect that all of the fanciful words of unity, of peace, that we get from the politicians and others at Christmas time, that this is the season for unity. Every day is a day for unity. Every day that you raise up and recognize that God has given you life is an opportunity for you to do good, an opportunity for you to grow, an opportunity for you to enhance your community, your family, your neighborhood, and Vincentian society. Let us seize that opportunity and make good on the potential that we have as Vincentians. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard on Nice Radio, 6 p.m. on Saturdays, repeated on Sundays at 9 p.m. But you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, hey, Keith Joseph.